Well, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Josh Kraushaar will be with us at 3:30, the editor-in-chief over at Jewish Insider, longtime political reporter. We'll talk to him about this presidential election and the chaos that's ahead at the Democrat convention. He's got a lot to say on that. Jeff Ingersoll is with us at 4 o'clock. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, and importantly, a United States Marine Corps combat correspondent who was in Iraq in 2006. That's the same year JD Vance was there. We'll talk about the left's fresh attacks on combat correspondents. They're now attacking combat correspondents, saying that they're not real members of the military or something. We'll discuss with Jeff ahead. And then General Keith Kellogg is here at 4:30. We'll talk to him. He's the retired 3-star Army general, and he's with the America First Policy Institute. He has got some thoughts on Governor Tim Walz and stolen valor. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It's now been 18 days of Kamala Harris not answering any questions as a presidential candidate before the press. They have a ridiculous strategy right now that is ridiculous to you and I, but I guess is working with the legacy media. Kamala Harris is doing apparently some number of off-the-record conversations with those big outlets, those reporters, and they are substituting that for any meaningful on-the-record conversation that you and I can hear. So in other words, they're having secret conversations with the press, but no public conversations with Kamala Harris. And the goal for the Kamala campaign is she won't be forced to have to do a public press conference or a meaningful public interview, so long as she keeps the press at bay by giving them secret morsels every day, which is another way of merely disseminating campaign talking points, I should emphasize. Because if it's off the record, these reporters are not able to, quote, include it in their coverage. But you know it's shaping their coverage. You know, if you know that they're having meetings with Kamala Harris and she's rambling on about something, it is shaping the way that these reporters cover the entire election. So they're just swapping talking points and not doing anything in public. And the goal for the Kamala campaign is to keep the press at bay, to stroke their egos, make them feel like they're on the inside, write the talking points for them to carry to the public, and then not have their fingerprints on it at all. So that's the strategy. This is a part of the manipulation of the public that the Kamala campaign is doing right now. No meaningful press conferences. Meanwhile, what is Donald Trump doing? President Trump is right now in the midst of a marathon press conference. It's a press conference that started just a couple of minutes after 2 o'clock. It is now 3:09. And as I speak, President Trump is still going. I'm going to dip in here. I want you to hear and see. Maybe we'll stick with it for a bit. Here's President Trump receiving yet another question.
Start the largest mass deportation in the history of our country because we have no choice. It's not sustainable. And we are going to start with violent criminals, and we're going to start then with criminals. And our local police is going to work with us because they know everything about the people. They know their names. They know everything about them. They know their middle name. They know their numbers. And as you know, the other side is trying. You know, look, for years I wondered, why are they allowing these people to come in at levels like this? It was incredible. And I said two reasons. They're either really stupid, and I don't believe they're stupid, because anybody that can cheat on elections like they cheat is not stupid. Or, in the alternative, they have bad motives or they hate our country. And I used to think they hate our country. But lately I've seen where they're trying to sign these people up to vote. And they have to stop. They cannot let illegal immigrants vote in this upcoming election. All right, one more question. Go ahead, one more. Make it a good one, please.
Regarding Social Security taxes.
Right.
She's asking about Social Security. Bad audio here.
We have so many ways of making money in this country. We're not going to affect our Social Security. We're not changing it. And I proved that over 4 years. And we're going to do it. It's very unfair to people. They spend their life and they're great citizens and they pay in. We're not going to charge tax to Social Security, the seniors. We're not going to do it. We're not going to charge. And also tax. I say the two things. We're going to have no tax on seniors, Social Security, and we're going to have no tax on tips. Very simple. And we are a country that has so many different ways to make money. We have under our feet more liquid gold, I call it oil, and gas, than any country in the world, much more than Saudi Arabia, much more than Russia. We have so many different ways we can make money. We're not going to hurt our seniors with Social Security, and we're not going to charge them tax. Okay?
I think someone's asking about deportation. Again, hard to hear. This the audio being gated out.
We should not have sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities is a way of protecting criminals, and we should not have sanctuary cities. And if you go to California, and I know it well, I have property out there, great property. If you go to California and you ask the people of California, do they like the idea of sanctuary cities? They don't like it. They're tired of it. They're tired of crime. They're tired of what's happened to our country. Our country's become a crime-ridden mess, and we're going to stop it on November 5th. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Waiting to see if he answers anything else. Smattering of applause from the people probably working for and with the campaign. There he goes, President Trump walking away in Mar-a-Lago now, and just completing a press conference about an hour and 10 minutes. That's the distance. And one of the points that he emphasized today is Kamala's not doing this. Kamala, he said in so many ways, is too stupid to do this. She can't handle it. She's not even capable of answering questions. And it is crystal clear that they are doing everything they can to hide her from the press. The thought process, I think, is in part that they're going to put Tim Walz out in front of the press and try and have him answer some questions because he's more adept at it. But the reality for them is that Walz has now been caught lying quite a bit about his record, especially his military record. And this idea, he's claimed in a variety of ways that he served in Afghanistan. In fact, one of his first campaign announcements from his prior political runs declared that he was a veteran of Afghanistan. He's also apparently, the big story this week is that he was given some advance notice. He was made aware that he was about to be deployed to Iraq, and he rushed to quit the military as that was coming through. And that has been the source of a tremendous amount of consternation from the people that he served with, now furious about his decision to abandon them ahead of their deployment. His false claims about the state of his rank and what he retired as. So there's just a lot of scrutiny coming his way. And it really tells you something, doesn't it, about how shoddy Kamala Harris is as a chief executive. If you are running for president of the United States, one of the rationales that you need to establish with the voting public is that you're a good leader, that you can actually run an organization, that you can vet people who are going to join that organization, that you can prevent the types of dramas that we're now seeing play out around Tim Walz at light speed. This is not new information. Tim Walz's lies, his dishonesty about his own military record, has come up in his prior campaigns. It's not like they had to dig deep to find this. Kamala Harris's campaign, if they had done 4 minutes of Google searching, would have been able to establish that this is going to be a liability for Tim Walz. And yet she chose him anyway. It's a sign that she's incompetent at the campaign level, never mind at the presidential level. So this is just the worst possible start for adding a running mate to the ticket. It's getting a lot of attention. You have various news networks begrudgingly admitting that Tim Walz deceived the public about his military service. And those news networks are not just Fox, not just the places that you and I might like, but also the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world who are now having to begrudgingly mention this. And the reality is, up until this point, they haven't mentioned it at all. In fact, you get senators like Tina Smith from Minnesota. She was completely unaware that JD Vance served in the military. So when JD Vance brings up that Tim Walz is guilty of stolen valor here, then she goes, well, when did JD Vance ever serve in the military? When was he in the military? And Jim Acosta, of all people, has to correct her.
Well, here is Tim Walz, who enlisted when he was 17 years old. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. And I'm not aware of any military service that JD Vance has ever served. So let's just make the comparison there. And what happened in the tragedy of the killing of George Marines, Floyd and then the unrest. Yeah, okay, pardon me for that.
I think that's the extent of their conversation on the subject. He was in the Marines, That's Jim Acosta's contribution. Can I say, having watched that clip a couple of times, and Corey, you fill me in if you think I'm wrong here. I think a producer got in Jim Acosta's ear and said he was in the Marines. That JD Vance was a Marine. Because Acosta nodded. If you rewatch that clip, Acosta nods as Tina Smith says, I'm not aware of any military service by JD Vance. And Acosta nods along. I'm almost positive a producer got into his ear and said, hey, he was in the Marines. And that's when you had this, when Acosta jumped back and was like, well, he was in the Marines. And that's the extent of Acosta's knowledge. He doesn't know anything else. He was in the Marines. That's it. Nancy Pelosi did something similar. She was on with Andrea Mitchell on MSNBC, and it led to this very awkward exchange.
JD Vance has criticized him as never having been in combat. And,
has he? Has he?
Well,
has JD Vance been in combat?
Well, he was over in Iraq, I think, as a public relations officer, as a communications officer. I think that's the case.
And that's it. That's the extent of their conversation on the subject. J.D. Vance was in Iraq, deployed there for about half a year between 2005 and 2006. And he was in some very dangerous areas of Iraq. I'd imagine you wouldn't want to be deployed to Iraq. If you had your choice, you probably don't want to be deployed to Iraq in 2005 and 2006. J.D. Vance was. These combat correspondents have seen some what they would refer to as gnarly things. Pretty upsetting things for most human beings to see in combat. And J.D. Vance was there. J.D. Vance was there. And here you have Nancy Pelosi going, has he been in combat? And then you hear her, she almost asks earnestly at the end, has he been in combat? Like she didn't know. But she doesn't know. She doesn't know. Or maybe she does, and she's just lying again. Either way, that's the way the media has been handling the fact that Tim Walz has lied about his service. That's how the Democrats have been handling it. This is how the media has been handling it. In fact, elsewhere on CNN, there's a hostess called Brianna Kieler who is suggesting that because J.D. Vance was a combat correspondent, that he didn't really do anything meaningful or dangerous.
I also think that J.D. Vance, as a messenger on this, may be an imperfect messenger. Because we have, as you introduced him, as a combat correspondent, which was what his title was. But when you dig a little deeper into that, he was a public affairs specialist, someone who did not see combat, which certainly the title combat correspondent kind of gives you a different impression. So he may be the imperfect messenger on that.
What the hell is that? Now, a number of people who have served in that role have been killed, actually, in combat. These guys, these combat correspondents, many of them would carry both camera and rifle at the same time in order to be United States Marines, in their case, and to protect themselves amidst combat as they were documenting history unfolding in a very gruesome way before their very eyes. CNN's Brianna Kieler, in a grotesque way, trying to downplay J.D. Vance's presence in Iraq during that really pivotal time. So, this is par for the course, though, that the media, instead of giving Tim Walz the scrutiny that he deserves for his deception, they've decided instead to take the guy who did serve honorably, who did go to Iraq, who did deploy, and try and trash him, and to invent something that is not true, that there was something cowardly about being a correspondent in Iraq. Far from it. We'll talk coming up to a couple of great guests on this subject. Among them, a Marine Corps combat correspondent from 2006, now an editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, Jeff Ingersoll, my good friend and colleague at the Daily Caller. We'll talk to him at 4 o'clock about this. He's got a lot to say. And General Keith Kellogg is also here at 4:30. A great soldier, great patriot. He has children who are patriots who have served this country. He will talk to us about what it all means and what he thinks of the way Tim Walz has represented himself in public. He's got quite a bit to say as well. And, of course, you can join us at 888-630-9625. First, a lot of calls coming in, so let me take them. I've got Richard calling in from Manassas on line 3. Richard, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. The ignorance of the left is just astounding. 2003, when we went into Iraq, the front lines disappeared. There were no front lines following that. Yeah, everywhere was behind the line. We had BBIDs on the FOB in Ramadi, artillery rounds landing on the FOB every day. Yeah. I lost friends inside the wire. I lost friends outside the wire. And to say that a public affairs specialist is not in combat is ludicrous. Look up Specialist Hilda Clayton. Hilda Clayton, they named the combat camera building after her. She photographed her own death in Afghanistan in 2013 as 2 Afghan soldiers were test firing mortar rounds, and a mortar exploded in the tube, and she caught it on camera right before it killed her. So I can tell you I'm a little amped up about it, but to say that, oh, they didn't see combat, we all saw combat. Every last one of us, male, female, didn't matter.
You know, Brianna Kieler was not the only person who posted something to this effect today. Adam Kinzinger also, crying Adam Kinzinger, also did something similar and really downplayed JD Vance's service, acting like it was nothing. And as you're pointing out, all these guys who were out there covering on the front lines as United States Marines, as soldiers, as airmen, what they were seeing were really in the midst of some of the most grueling combat that we've seen in some time, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, everywhere. I mean, our logistics convoys are getting blown up. I roll past one, I see 16 blown up vehicles on the side of the road, and just think, hell, that could have been me if I'd left an hour earlier or an hour later. Everybody's just lucky that, that came out of there with minimal or to no injury, because every day we were at risk. I had one soldier of mine that got injured. 4 others were killed in the same strike. And fast forward 8 years, I run into a guy that was serving with a gunny sergeant in Ramadi, and he was so traumatized by it, he was willing to eat a bullet because he wanted to make sure he went out on his own terms. That's how bad it got for some folks over there.
Man, oh man. Richard, thank you very much for your call, as always, sir. Really appreciate that. A good perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up. We've got a lot more to get to, including more of President Trump's remarks today during his very long but useful press conference today. We will be talking more about Tim Walz's deception about his military service and the reaction to it, the way the left is trying to defend it. And coming up in mere moments, we chat with Josh Kraushaar. He's with Jewish Insider. You know that right now there are organizations pulling permits to protest outside of the Democrat convention in Chicago. And, the pro-Hamas groups are having a very easy time. How about the pro-Israel groups? The update on that subject ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Well, good afternoon to you. It's now 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we've got Jeff Ingersoll joining us. He's editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller, and he was a U.S. Marine Corps combat correspondent, did 2 tours in Iraq. We'll chat with him about all of today's, Marine Corps and politics-related news. That's at 4. And then 4:30, retired 3-star Army General Keith Kellogg is here. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, let's talk about what's going on in presidential politics right now, and the decision to make Tim Walz the running mate rather than Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. It's led to a lot of attention this week on whether or not the Democrats are dealing with an out-of-control anti-Semitism problem or not, leading even CNN's Van Jones to raise that that particular form of darkness has marbled itself into the Democrat Party. Here with more on that subject and a lot more, Josh Kraushaar joins us. He's the editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider, and he joins us now. Josh, great to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince, great to be back with you.
I do want to start with your initial reactions to the decision to choose Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro. Because in the lead up to this, Josh, I was watching news outlet after news outlet raising it might be a problem for Kamala to choose Shapiro because he's Jewish, which I thought was kind of brazen, actually, to say out loud in public. But all these news outlets kept doing it. Were they right in the end? Is that why Josh Shapiro was kept off the ticket?
Well, I think one of the reasons was that there is a very hard left, anti-Israel, and at times anti-Semitic faction within the Democratic Party. And if Kamala Harris picked the most popular, candidate on the board, Governor Shapiro, who is from the state of Pennsylvania, which is about as important a political state as there is on the map this year, there was still a risk that you would have a convention that would be divided, that you could have her running mate being booed in the hall because he's Jewish and because he supports Israel. There would be protests that would be pretty ugly. They're still going to be happening, by the way, but they could get uglier if she tapped Shapiro. And the threats that were being unleashed against Shapiro in the week before she made the decision were full of anti-Semitism, full of some ugly stereotypes and attacks. So I don't think Kamala Harris is anti-Semitic. I don't think she, looked at the deep stakes candidates and decided on Governor Walz because of anti-Semitism. But I do think there's a degree of anti-Semitism reflected by a fringe of the party.
Yes.
And instead of confronting it, Vince, instead of saying this is wrong, this shouldn't be part of our Democratic Party, they've indulged it and it played a role in the decision-making process.
Right. Her husband, Doug Emhoff, is Jewish, right? So I suspect she's not anti-Semitic in that kind of way. But you're right that she's beholden to it clearly.
That's right. I mean, Doug Emhoff is Jewish, and some of this is about views towards Israel. There is a squad. I mean, just look at the squad members who lost the last couple of months. Cori Bush this week and Jamal Bowman. They've said some of the most vile things, not just about Israel, but about Jews. They go hand in hand in many cases. And instead of saying, hey, this is wrong, this shouldn't be part of our Democratic Party, this is never the case. This is a pretty new development in terms of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Indulgent of these extremists. She's indulged it. She's and you have Tim Walz too. He said nice things about Ilhan Omar, who's had her share of anti-Semitic comments in her short career in Congress. So
yeah, and the squad is pretty enthusiastic about Tim Walz being picked as well. They were, right away, Ilhan Omar, AOC, and others immediately coming out and being saying that Tim Walz is a great pick.
Yeah, and look, Tim Walz and I covered him when he was in Congress. He sort of evolved in his political career, as a lot of Democrats have been doing lately, where he started out as a moderate from a rural district in southern Minnesota, and he got more and more progressive as he became governor and then got control of the state legislature in the last few years. And he's passed a whole, slate of pretty liberal legislation. And he was the governor during the Minneapolis riots. He got criticized by his own party, by the Minneapolis mayor, for how he handled the out-of-control violence that we all, covered at the time, Vince. The lack of leadership, the lack of controlling the riots and violence in his home city, his home state. That's a big vulnerability. I actually expected the Republicans to be a little more aggressive on that front, but that's something that's going to be something we'll be hearing a lot more of. About
sure. And he didn't deploy the National Guard until the 3rd Precinct was burned down in Minneapolis, which was an awful image that all of us watched across the country. The suffering only continuing in Minneapolis, and he didn't respond to it in any meaningful sense. And he offered mealy-mouthed excuses when he was confronted about this. He said, well, we would have done things differently.
Yeah, look, and on criminal justice issues, he is someone on the left side of that divide. He has been someone who has not, he hasn't called for defunding the police, but he's sort of been indulgent of those types of views within the Democratic Party. So, that is a vulnerability he has. He certainly stylistically is a folksy southern Minnesota former football coach, served in the National Guard, though that's becoming a little bit more controversial lately. But, he has a great biography that appeals to blue-collar people on paper. But his record, especially as governor, has been very, very progressive.
Nobody told you to say folksy, by the way, right? You didn't, that talking point was not served to you by the DNC, was it?
Well, I just watched his. I mean, I thought he did a good job in that campaign rally in Philadelphia. But look, the record matters too.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, one more thing on Josh Shapiro. There's the Pennsylvania governor. There was a storyline coming out this week that Josh Shapiro himself seemed to suggest that he wanted out, that he didn't want to be in anymore. CBS says that Shapiro's team felt his interview with Kamala Harris did not go as well as it could have, according to multiple sources familiar with the vetting process. On Sunday following his interview, Shapiro called the Harris campaign and expressed reservations about leaving his job as governor, the sources said. I smell a tremendous amount of BS in this storyline. Do you?
That was my reaction to Vince, that it was sort of after the fact that you didn't get the job, and this sort of after the fact spin that comes out on both sides. And I thought the spin that the Harris folks were sending out that he was too ambitious. He was too he wanted to have too much influence as vice president. That seemed to be kind of ridiculous. And not having chemistry was also I thought, a little odd in that most running mates, frankly, are not best friends with the presidential nominee. Mike Pence was not particularly close with Donald Trump. Biden was not particularly close with Barack Obama. They picked the best running mate on the board to help you win the election. And that's where the political controversy comes from, because Josh Shapiro, it's like a football. If you're looking at the NFL draft, you want to get the best player on the board. Governor Shapiro was the best player based on his political stats, based on his talents on the board. She sort of did an equity pick. She picked the person she felt comfortable with, not necessarily the most talented politician, but someone who she felt more comfortable with.
Okay, so you're tapping into what I wanted to ask you next, which is this kind of suggests to me that Kamala Harris is wielding more control over her campaign than perhaps the right may want to ever give her credit for. We often talk about, whose interests are being served in the party, who's really calling the shots. The Walz pick, it seems like a Kamala pick to me. It seems like Kamala Harris meets with these guys, and she goes, this is the one I prefer, and it's not the politically smart move. It's not the one that's going to increase your chances of winning a battleground state. In fact, it seems like he's the guy who's most ideologically aligned with her. He kind of buys into the defund the police narratives, or whatever it is they want to call them now. He is the one who wants to release the criminals who are burning down Minneapolis. They seem simpatico in terms of their basic worldviews. It struck me, Josh, that she's the one who picked him, and that may explain why they're having so much trouble with his public presence now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, look, if you wanted to pick the progressive who could sell best to politically, who could try to convince people that he's more moderate than he actually is, that's Tim Walz. Tim Walz was of all the contenders on the long list, Tim Walz was by far the most progressive candidate on the board. Mark Kelly, Josh Shapiro, Gina Raimondo. I mean, you look at the long list. The one person who had an ideological record that was well to the left is Tim Walz. But he does, call it folksy, call it whatever you want. He's from a blue-collar part of the country, Nebraska. He has a biography that on paper at least, can appeal to some blue-collar voters. I don't think it's going to sell, but
only in the way though that Kamala Harris and Molly Jong-Fast would fall for. You know what I mean? It's like the rest of the country's like, I'm not falling for this crap. But if you sit inside of MSNBC green rooms, you might be like, man, that guy's so folksy.
Well, and I think the record in most recent political history is that if you're the governor of a state that's burning down and you take positions that are just culturally out of the mainstream on a whole host of issues, that can matter more than what you look like, right? I mean, ultimately substance does matter. So it does feel like these last few weeks, Vince, vibes. It's all about vibes, right? It's all about. She's not done an interview. The vice president hasn't sat down for an interview. Donald Trump did a press conference this afternoon. That's going to be something that they're trying to play, to make a football analogy again. They're trying to play prevent defense, run out the clock, and hope she doesn't make too many mistakes in the short stretch of this presidential campaign.
Lastly, on that point, I started the show by mentioning that apparently, according to the poll reporting on the subject, the traveling poll that's with Kamala Harris's campaign, she has been doing off-the-record conversations with reporters, a number of them apparently, in these recent weeks. But no on-the-record interviews, nothing, no gaggles, nothing like that. Should reporters be cognizant of the fact that they're being used in this way? In other words, they're being served off-the-record interviews as a way to prevent them from saying out loud in public that she is not giving them face time for public interviews. What do you think of this?
Well, look, I can tell you that politicians do off-the-record interviews all the time on both sides.
Of course.
It's a way to. So that's not what's unusual. What's unusual is that we're now a few weeks into her candidacy, and she's not even done a sit-down interview with a friendly news outlet, no less tough news outlet. We do know the debate. It looks like there's going to be a debate on ABC News in September. So at least we'll have that before early voting in some states. But look, you are hearing reporters starting to say, "Hey, what's up with this? She's not doing any interviews. She's doing these rallies. She's reading it from a teleprompter. She's got to explain where she stands on some of the most important issues affecting the country." And I think that you're going to hear more of that if she doesn't really submit to any questions.
Their convention is coming up, and when it happens, one of the concerns that's existed is will there be pro-Hamas, anti-Israel type protests outside of the convention space in Chicago? Right, you have some reporting up today on Jewish Insider about the ease and or difficulty that various protest groups are having getting permits to conduct those protests. What have you discovered?
That's right. Well, we've reported that there's something of a double standard in the city of Chicago, led by Mayor Brandon Johnson, which has given an anti-Israel group, a pro-Palestinian group, a permit to march all the way to the United Center, where the Democratic National Committee is holding its convention. But a very mainstream pro-Israel group has not heard at all from the mayor's office for weeks about their ability to hold a rally supporting Israel within the city of Chicago during the convention. So there's a lot of worry that this is discrimination. It's a double standard, and we've heard radio silence from the mayor and the city of Chicago and why they are kind of giving a apparent blocking the pro-Israel group from actually having their free speech and having their views heard.
And the pro-Israel group didn't just file it, say, yesterday. This was filed, according to your site's reporting, at the beginning of July. So they've been waiting some time for an answer, and they just haven't gotten one.
That's right. It's been weeks. And the city of Chicago did put out a statement a couple hours ago not giving any real answers about the status of that application, and no real answer other than to say that they're denying that there's any discriminatory intent there. So
yet more evidence that that the Democrats are beholden to the most radical elements of their party, right there in your excellent reporting. Josh Kraushaar, as always, really appreciate your insights and your excellent news operation, Jewish Insider. Thank you, sir. Good to talk to you today.
Thanks. All right.
Okay, you may have heard Josh Kraushaar reference something, a developing piece of news just a moment ago, which is that CNN's headline on this is Trump and Harris agreed to debate on ABC on September 10th, network says. This is not quite as clean as the CNN headline makes it out to be, and here's why. President Trump just did a press conference wherein he laid out three dates that he has agreed to, and listen to President Trump explain this first, and then I'll get into what all of this could mean.
With all of that being said, I think it's very important to have debates, and we've agreed with Fox on a date of September 4th. We've agreed with NBC, fairly full agreement, subject to them, on September 10th. And we've agreed with ABC on September 25th. So we have those three dates, and those networks, they're very anxiously awaiting that date and those dates. So we have September 4th, September 10th, and September 25th. We have spoken to the heads of the network, and it's all been confirmed, other than some fairly minor details. Audience, some location, which city would we put it into, but all things that will be settled very easily. I think it'll be very easy.
Okay, so a couple of details. One, a Trump advisor had apparently told CNN that President Trump inverted the NBC and ABC dates when he was explaining that. So the dates should be September 4th, Fox, September 10th, ABC, September 25th, NBC. Now, here's the thing. Kamala Harris's campaign is saying, oh, yeah, we agree to the ABC debate. Let's go. And so now all the headlines are, oh, she's agreed. Here's what I'm not clear on right now at this hour, at this moment. It sounds like President Trump is saying his condition is that she do all three. She definitely doesn't want to do the Fox debate because she's chicken. She's scared to death of doing a Fox debate. Are you serious? You're scared of Brett Baer and Martha McCallum? You're scared of just sitting down and answering questions? Come on. I mean, that's pathetic. If you can't handle a Fox debate, you can't be president of the United States. What more evidence do we need? So we await President Trump's actual remarks on this subject because there's a bit of, in political terms, bracketing going on right now. They're making it seem like, oh, it's done. It's a done deal. There's an ABC debate. That's it. They're going to debate. They're all going to appear. I just heard Trump say he's got three debates in mind. He's got the networks agreeing with him. Will Kamala do it? And it sounds like, once again, she is chickening out of this long, extended, sort of meaningful exchanges over the course of three debates, which, by the way, I should point out, is the typical presidential debate structure, three of them. She is planning on maybe doing one with a tremendous assist from people like, as Trump would say, George Slopadopoulous. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Hey, coming up here, just moments away, as the horrendous rollout for Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate continues, the Democrats have taken to attacking JD Vance as some sort of chicken hawk, as a guy he was a coward. He wasn't really serving in meaningful combat in Iraq. Of course, he was in the thick of it. Jeff Ingersoll will join us next. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller and a U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran. We'll talk to him.